The mirror cracks. Reality splinters into fragments we cannot piece together again. Franz Kafka once wrote in his diary, "A book must be the axe for the frozen sea inside us." In 1915, when the Metamorphosis emerged from his restless mind, Kafka wielded that axe with surgical precision. One morning, Gregor Samsa awakens as a monstrous vermin, and we discover that transformation is not about becoming something new. It is about revealing what we have always been. Prague breathes through cobblestones slick with morning dew. The Austro-Hungarian Empire crumbles at its edges, and modernity gnaws at ancient foundations. Kafka walks these streets, a ghost among bureaucrats, his father's shadow stretching long across his path. The city speaks in 3 languages, German, Czech, and silence. It is in this silence that Kafka finds his voice, writing in German while living as a minority, forever displaced in his own home. The transformation begins not with horror, but with acceptance. Gregor's first concern is not his grotesque body, but his job, his family's expectations, the weight of duty that has crushed his human spirit long before his human form. This is Kafka's genius. He shows us that the real metamorphosis happened years ago, in countless small surrenders to a world that devours meaning. Kafka's own body betrays him. Tuberculosis settles in his lungs like an unwelcome tenant. He feels himself becoming something other, something diminished. His cough echoes through thin apartment walls, a sound that will eventually silence him at 41. The disease becomes metaphor, the metaphor becomes prophecy. Writers often bleed their own wounds onto the page, but Kafka transfuses his entire circulatory system into his fiction. The father looms. Hermann Kafka, a successful merchant, casts shadows that stretch across Franz's entire existence. In letter after letter, the son attempts to explain himself to a man who sees only weakness where others might recognize sensitivity. Gregor's father hurls apples at his transformed son, embedding fruit into flesh. The apple rots there, festering, until infection claims the creature that was once human. The Industrial Revolution grinds through human lives like gears through flesh. Factories belch smoke, cities swell with workers, and the individual becomes a replaceable part in an incomprehensible machine. Kafka works in insurance, calculating the value of human suffering, reducing lives to statistics. Each claim form is a small death, each payout a measurement of what society deems a person worth. The bedroom becomes a prison. Gregor's transformation traps him in space, but his real imprisonment began long before, in the narrow corridors of expectation, in the suffocating embrace of family obligation, in the daily death of dreams deferred. The walls close in, and we realize they were always closing in. The metamorphosis simply makes the invisible visible. Language fails. Gregor loses his ability to communicate, his words becoming insect sounds incomprehensible to human ears. Yet this loss reveals a profound truth. How often do we truly communicate even when we possess perfect speech? Kafka understands that isolation is not about being alone. It is about being surrounded by people who cannot hear the frequency of your desperation. The travelling salesman's suitcase sits empty. Gregor's career, his identity, his value to the world, all packed away, no longer needed. The man who once navigated the complex web of commerce now struggles to navigate his own room. Modern work strips away humanity, leaving only function. When function fails, what remains? Kafka asks this question with the gentleness of a surgeon and the precision of a knife. The sister moves through the house like a ghost of former love. Greta, once Gregor's closest ally, tends to his needs with growing resentment. Love curdles into duty, duty into burden, burden into hatred. She plays violin, her music floating through the house like a memory of beauty. But even beauty cannot bridge the gap between what was and what is. The 3 boarders invade the family home, bringing with them the judgment of the outside world. They represent society's gaze, cold, evaluating, ready to withdraw their approval at the first sign of imperfection. Their presence turns the house into a stage, the family into performers. But some truths are too large to hide, too monstrous to mask. Kafka's Insomnia becomes a creative force. In the hours when normal people sleep, he writes, darkness becomes his collaborator, silence his muse. The city sleeps while he explores the labyrinths of consciousness. Night reveals what day conceals. In the small hours, boundaries blur between reality and dream, between self and other, between human and inhuman. The Jewish experience in Prague shapes every sentence. To be Jewish is to be other. To be German-speaking is to be other. To be sensitive in a harsh world is to be other. Kafka inhabits multiple forms of otherness simultaneously. This outsider status becomes his superpower. He sees from the margins, writes from the edge, speaks for all who have ever felt like aliens in their own lives. The apple rots. Flesh decays around the foreign object embedded in Gregor's back. The father's violence festers, becoming infection, becoming death. Yet the apple also suggests knowledge, the bitter fruit of understanding one's place in the world. Sometimes love and violence wear the same face. Sometimes the people who should protect us are the ones who wound us most deeply. Kafka's engagement to Felice Bauer dissolves like sugar in rain. Marriage represents normalcy, the conventional life he both craves and fears. His letters to her reveal a man torn between desire for connection and terror of intimacy. The domestic sphere becomes another prison. How can someone who feels like a monster believe himself worthy of love? The office suffocates. Kafka's work at the Workers' Accident Insurance Institute exposes him daily to human suffering reduced to paperwork. Industrial accidents become claims, pain becomes statistics, people become problems to be solved. He writes reports about crushed fingers and severed limbs, documenting the ways modern life mangles the human body. Each report is a small story of transformation, from whole to broken, from person to case number. The mother weeps behind closed doors. Her tears fall for the son she recognizes and the creature she cannot accept. Love becomes a battlefield where recognition wars with revulsion. Mothers are supposed to love unconditionally, but conditions change. When the familiar becomes foreign, when the beloved becomes beastly, what survives of love? The cleaning woman understands. She alone shows no fear of Gregor's transformed state, perhaps because she has seen enough of life's ugliness to know that appearance often masks essential humanity. Her acceptance comes not from love, but from pragmatism. She has scrubbed away too much of life's messiness to be shocked by another form of chaos. Kafka's writing desk becomes an altar. Here, in the quiet hours, he sacrifices sleep and social life to the gods of literature. Each sentence is an offering, each story a prayer to whatever forces govern meaning. The act of writing transforms the writer. The man who sits down to write is not the same man who stands up. Art changes the artist, sometimes beyond recognition. The food turns to ash. Gregor's human appetites die with his human form. The favourite dishes that once brought pleasure now bring only disgust. He craves rotting scraps, the detritus of human consumption. Our desires define us. When desire transforms, identity follows. We become what we hunger for, and hunger becomes our prison. The dawn light filters through curtains like judgment. Each morning brings fresh horror, not the horror of transformation, but the horror of continuation. Gregor must wake again, face again the impossibility of his existence. Time moves differently for the transformed. Minutes stretch into hours, hours into eternities. The clock becomes an enemy, marking the passage of a life that has stopped living. Kafka's tuberculosis whispers in his chest. The disease speaks in a language of blood and breathlessness, reminding him daily that the body is fragile, that transformation is inevitable, that death is patient but persistent. He writes against time, racing to empty his mind onto paper before the disease claims him. Each cough is a reminder, each page a victory against mortality. The travelling samples gather dust. Gregor's professional life, represented by fabric swatches and order forms, becomes archaeology of a former self. The materials of commerce mock the creature who once believed in progress. Capitalism promises transformation, from poor to rich, from nothing to something, but some transformations lead nowhere, promise nothing, deliver only the bitter taste of broken dreams. The sister's music soars through the house like a caged bird. Her violin speaks the language Gregor has lost, expressing beauty in a world that has forgotten its meaning. Yet even music cannot bridge the gap between human and inhuman. Art persists in the face of horror. Beauty insists on existing even when existence becomes unbearable. The violin sings of worlds beyond transformation, beyond suffering, beyond the reach of change. The father's uniform hangs in the closet like an empty threat. Authority requires costume, power demands performance. Without the uniform, he is just another man crushed by circumstances beyond his control. The symbols of power become prisons for those who wear them. The father's strength is performance, his authority a mask that hides fear and inadequacy. Kafka's letters burn with unspoken passion. Words become his lovers, sentences his children, paragraphs his legacy. He pours himself into language because language is the only space where he can exist fully. The writer's life is lived on paper. The real Franz Kafka exists not in Prague's streets but in the infinite space between one word and the next. The metamorphosis spreads beyond Gregor. The family transforms too, from caregivers to captors, from loving to resentful, from human to inhuman. Transformation is contagious, reshaping everything it touches. We become what we behold. The monster creates monsters, the victim creates victims. Change radiates outward like ripples in a pond, touching shores we never intended to reach. The rain falls on Prague's rooftops like tears the city cannot shed. Kafka walks these wet streets, his footsteps echoing in empty squares. The city holds its breath, waiting for the empire to collapse, for the old world to die. History moves like a glacier, slowly but inexorably. The present moment contains all future transformations, all coming catastrophes, all potential metamorphoses. The window becomes a barrier. Gregor presses against glass, watching life continue without him. The world moves on with terrible efficiency, proving that individual suffering barely registers in the cosmic order. Windows promise connection but deliver only separation. They show us what we cannot reach, taunt us with proximity to the life we cannot live. Kafka's notebooks fill with fragments, half-finished stories, abandoned thoughts, incomplete transformations. He writes in the margins of his own existence, adding footnotes to a life that feels increasingly fictional. The writer's mind is a graveyard of unfinished ideas. Each abandoned story is a small death, each incomplete thought a missed opportunity for transcendence. The debt accumulates. Gregor's inability to work transforms him from provider to burden, from asset to liability. The family's financial situation becomes a daily reminder of his worthlessness. Money measures meaning in a world that has forgotten other forms of value. When we cannot contribute economically, we cease to exist socially. The market becomes the measure of human worth. The isolation deepens. Gregor's room becomes a world unto itself, a universe of suffering contained within four walls. He learns the geography of confinement, maps the territory of despair. Solitude reveals who we are when no one is watching. In isolation, we confront the self we have been hiding from, the person we are afraid to acknowledge. Kafka's cough grows worse. The disease progresses with mechanical precision, transforming his body from the inside out. He becomes a stranger to himself, watching his own dissolution with clinical detachment. The writer documents his own metamorphosis, turning illness into art, suffering into sentences, mortality into meaning. Even dying becomes material for literature. The boarders leave. Their departure signals the family's final disgrace, their reputation ruined by association with the monstrous. Respectability crumbles like paper in rain. Society's acceptance is conditional, temporary, fragile. The moment we fail to meet expectations, we are expelled from the community of the acceptable. The sister changes. Greta grows from girl to woman, her beauty blooming as her brother withers. She embodies the future while he represents the past, the obsolete, the discarded. Time moves differently for the young. They transform naturally, gracefully, while others struggle against change. Youth is metamorphosis made beautiful. The final transformation approaches. Gregor's body weakens, his grip on existence loosening. Death becomes not tragedy but mercy, not ending but release from the unbearable weight of being. Sometimes the greatest transformation is dissolution, the final metamorphosis into nothingness. Peace comes disguised as ending, freedom as the absence of form. Kafka's words outlive their creator. While his body succumbs to disease, his sentences achieve immortality. The tuberculosis that destroys his lungs cannot touch the breath that animates his prose. Literature transforms mortality into permanence, suffering into significance, personal pain into universal understanding. The writer dies, but the words live on. The family emerges from mourning into mourning. Gregor's death releases them from the burden of his existence, allowing them to remember who they were before transformation claimed them. Grief becomes liberation, ending becomes beginning. The death of one enables the rebirth of many. Sometimes love requires letting go. The city breathes again. Prague continues its own metamorphosis, empire giving way to republic, old world yielding to new. The streets Kafka walked become memory. The buildings he inhabited become history. Everything transforms. Cities change, empires fall, languages die, but the human condition remains constant. We are all insects trapped in amber, beautiful and terrible and temporary. The book closes, but the transformation continues. Kafka's axe has cracked the frozen sea inside us, releasing waters that will never freeze again. We close the final page changed, carrying within us the knowledge that we too are always becoming something other. The metamorphosis is not Gregor's alone, it is ours. We are all travelling salesmen who might wake tomorrow as something unrecognizable, all sons and daughters carrying the weight of impossible expectations, all humans struggling to remain human in a world that demands we become something else. The mirror cracks, and in the fragments we see not one reflection but many. All the selves we have been, all the selves we are becoming, all the selves we fear to acknowledge. Kafka's genius lies not in showing us the monster, but in helping us recognize the monster was always there, waiting beneath the surface of our carefully constructed humanity.